This is Taylormade's newest wedge iteration, in that of the milled grind 4. And in today's video, we are going to be putting them head to head against my current gamer Vokey SM9s to see if they can take over the gamer spot in my bag. So let's get right into it. Right, guys, so really quickly, let's give you a brief rundown on these MG4s. First and foremost, we have spin tread on these MG4s, which acts as sort of a laser-etched tread pattern on the face, which should help you retain higher spin rates in wet weather conditions. We also have 7 sole grinds on these MG4s as opposed to 4 in the MG3, so very comparable to Vokey in that sense. Slightly darker finish on these MG4s in comparison to the 3s, very subtle, but just slightly darker. And additionally, a slightly lower center of gravity in these MG4s as opposed to the 3s, which should help give you a little bit more of a solid feel through impact. And lastly, the shaping of these MG4s is a little bit more rounded than the 3s, so going to be a little bit more comparable to something from Vokey in that sense. Now, in terms of our testing, how we're going to go about it, we're just going to take these out on the golf course and put them head to head in a bunch of different scenarios. I don't want to focus on spin and launch and wet weather performance in this review, because although I think those things are important, my SM9s have been in the bag for about a year now, and these are kind of fresh, so it's not really a super fair test in terms of launch and spin. And additionally, I think for the majority of us in dry conditions, fresh grooves are fresh grooves. I don't want to get caught up on 200 or 300 RPMs to spin. I really want to focus on the bigger things like look, feel, turf interaction, the sole grinds, etc., etc. So with that being said, we're out here on the golf course now. Let's get after it. Right, guys, so out here on the first hole, and what we're going to do is we're going to hit some fuller swing shots with the gap wedges and sand wedges, and then we'll move up around the greens and kind of hit some short game shots for you guys and talk you through the differences there. So Vokey SM9 is going to be a 50 08F, so a fuller sole on this wedge, and then the MG4 is going to be a 50 standard bounce with 9 degrees of bounce. So similar numbers, but the real difference is that this standard bounce has a little bit more trail edge and heel relief as opposed to the fuller sole on the Vokey. We'll start with my Vokey because that's kind of what we know and we're used to at this point. Looking down at it, it's a really good shape. I mean, you can say what you want about the tech, about the spin, feel of Vokeys, but one of the biggest reasons I believe that they are so popular on tour, with the exception of the grinds as well, is really the shaping. I think that is something Vokey really truly nails when it comes to the wedges. All right, decent shot there to the back of the green. In terms of turf interaction, it's good. I think the nice thing about this fuller sole is, although it has lower bounce, which I like, it doesn't tend to dig because there is a bit more width in terms of the actual sole itself. Looking down at this MG4 now, a little bit different shape. So to me, the lines on this are a little bit straighter in terms of the leading edge and top line, and even the toe area, but this one has a little bit more offset for sure in comparison to the Vokey. There's a little bit of a notch in the hosel to leading edge transition, which gives it the appearance of even more offset, I would say. Feel really good there, really good turf interaction, kind of got in and out of the turf very nicely. That's a very solid shot right there. I think the biggest differences you're going to notice in feel is not going to be from the actual material itself. I believe both of these wedges use 8620 carbon steel, and they're both cast. The real difference might be the fact that this is a raw face. It does not have a chrome plating on it, and so because of that, the Taylormade MG4 might just feel a skosh softer. I don't think it's going to be a big difference, but maybe just a skosh softer. I really love the lines, man. I think that in these fuller swing shots, the lines of the MG4 is just so clean. Just a little bit straighter. Feet right of the hole. Not a bad golf shot. Maybe it's just because of the raw face, but to me, the SM9 looks pretty clearly smaller. So, you know, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, I guess it's up to you to decide. I've always liked a little bit of a bigger head, to be honest. To me, this feels like more of a blade look. I wouldn't say that that's not a blade look. It's just a little bit bigger, a little bit more inviting, if that makes any sense. Yeah, the full sole, at least what I'm noticing, is just kind of gets in and out of the turf really easily. The standard bounce on the MG4 kind of tends to stick a little bit more into the ground, just a little bit. It's not like crazy, but as a whole, I mean, to me, it's not coming down to feel that much. I think the biggest things I'm noticing is the grinds themselves and then the looks of the wedges. Right, guys, so now we've got about 115 yards here. We'll start with the MG4. Baby's a little bit dirty, but let's just go with it. That was just a steep pull, and somehow it ended up close to the hole. SM9 now. To me, it just didn't feel like this one dug as much as the MG4. Maybe just because on the MG4, there's a little bit more heel relief. Like, that's the only thing I could think of. Because this has a higher bounce angle, but maybe just there's a little bit more narrowness here in the heel. And so if I kind of get that heel down, it wants to snag a little bit in comparison to the SM9. That's the only thing I could think of, because if we're not talking heel, to me, the MG4 very clearly plays with a little bit more bounce, even though they're both standard bounce wedges. Yeah, because that one did not snag at all. That was very nice. To me, in these 56-degree wedges, it kind of comes down to how you play the grind. If you get really low, you definitely have to be a little bit cognizant of that heel snagging. With the SM9, you don't really have to be so cognizant of it because there really is no heel relief on it. And then in terms of the shaping, I mean, the SM9 is just pretty clearly a little bit smaller, more rounded with less offset. MG4 a little bit straighter and has a little bit more offset. So now we've got kind of an interesting scenario where we have to kind of pitch across the green, but we have to actually fly it over a little bit of a slope. Because it's such a long way, I probably wouldn't use a 60 here. I would use a 55 degree, which is what I have. So looking down to this MG4, I'm gonna be honest, I really do not like the appearance of how much offset this has. I don't mind offset as long as it's progressive and consistent. This just almost feels like a gooseneck or something. It just feels like it kind of comes way out and it just doesn't really match up with the rest of the clubs in my bag, so not over the moon about it. But the shaping's good. I mean, I really do like the straighter lines. What's nice about the MG4s is they're a little bit more rounded than the 3s, so although I don't think it's maybe as beautiful a look as the SM9s when I go to open it up, it is an improvement over the 3s, at least in my opinion. A little bit better there. SM9 now, what I really like about this is although my SM9 is bent to degree strong, this still has onset. It's just a really good hosel to leading edge transition. There's no notch whatsoever between the hosel and the leading edge, and then there's a little bit of belly in the leading edge, so it literally just looks like this has onset. It does not look like it has any offset whatsoever. That's what I like about it. Now, to be honest with you, I prefer the leading edge of the MG4 in the 56 degree. I think this maybe has a little bit too much belly, but the overall shaping, I prefer the SM9. I think that there's little pieces to both I really like, and honestly, my ideal 56 degree would probably be a hybrid of these two wedges, but just the overall shaping of this to me is just a little bit nicer looking. But yeah, the nice thing about the belly is when you go to open it up like I'm going to do right here, it just looks so good open, and that was a much better golf shot. That's probably about 5-6 feet, so definitely feel like I can be a little bit steeper with the MG4 just because it has a little bit of a higher bounce angle. So like that one, I got a little bit steep. I maybe didn't have the best low point there, but it just didn't dig on me because there's just a hair more angle in the sole. That was just not a great shot at all. That kind of sucked. Yeah, and that one, again, not a great shot, but you can just tell, like, there's just a little bit less bounce on this Vokey XS as opposed to the MG4. Like, that one, again, kind of a similar scenario to the MG4 where I didn't feel like I had the best control over my low point. I felt the same way about that last SM9 shot, and that one dug a little bit more. Really, if you're in between the standard bounce grinds of these two wedges, you definitely need to know that the MG4 just plays a little bit higher in terms of the bounce angle as opposed to the SM9. I think that is important to note. Although wedges might say the same grind or a similar number, they don't always quite play the same, and that is really what I'm noticing between these two wedges. Right, guys, so we've got the 60-degree MG4 standard bounce C grind here, and we're going to try to hit this shot maybe a couple different ways and kind of see what we can muster up, if you will. All right, pretty good shot. I think the biggest thing with this standard bounce C grind on a shot like that, you can see it catch a little bit. Now, this thing tends to be really good in tighter conditions because it offers a little bit more bounce like a standard bounce wedge would, but because it has so much relief, you can really get underneath the golf ball when you have to. That being said, you definitely have to be a little bit cognizant of the heel and how narrow this edge here is because it can snag a little bit if you're not careful. We'll go ahead and play this a different way. Right now, we are a little bit into the grain, so it's definitely gonna want to grab more than it normally would or if we were down grain, for example. I just did not hit that hard enough. Pretty simple. And that one I hit harder, but it just grabbed it. So we'll take this one and we'll try to go a little higher with it. Now on this shot, I'm gonna try to make sure I don't come straight into the ground like that. I'm gonna try to maybe get a little bit shallower. That way we can kind of let this bounce ride the grass as opposed to kind of dig down into the grain, if that makes sense. Yeah, I mean, if you're a solid player and you know fundamentals of technique, you know how to avoid making that leading edge dig into the ground, I really like the standard bout C grind. I think this is easily going to be one of the most underrated wedge grinds in the whole MG4 lineup because it just offers so much versatility. It has enough bounce on those fuller swing shots, but it has tons of relief so you can really manipulate it around the greens. Now, I'll tell you what, at first, I would say I was a bigger fan of the look of the SM9 around the greens, at least in the 60 degree, because I liked that when you opened it up, it was really rounded, and I tend to like a little bit more rounded look in the 60 degree because I just find it a little bit more inviting to hit the golf ball up in the air. That being said, this MG4 looks really good. I think they nailed it in the 60 degree. The 50 and 56, there's a couple things maybe I don't love about the look, but this 60 is awesome. I love the raw face. I think it gives an awesome contrast between the toe and the heel. It kind of shows you where the hitting area is. I think when it's really sunny and glare tends to be a problem on chrome wedges, this thing is going to look really good for sure in comparison. That's it. All right, that's about 10 feet. Not a bad shot, not a great shot. That one right there was kind of an example where I didn't do a good job at controlling my low point, and because this heel is very narrow, it did kind of dig a little bit. That being said, in this firmer sand, I just feel like you can hit so many different shots. You can really get low with this thing, and if you're good at making sure it doesn't dig, you can hit a shot like that that comes out high with spin, and you just don't really have to worry about the heel bouncing off the sand like you maybe have to do with my SM9. A little bit of spin there. Not bad, not great. This one, we'll try to get one sitting down a little bit. I guess I could just step on it. That one's kind of sitting really nasty. Kind of grabbed into that fringe so it didn't run out so much. This one's kind of sitting a little differently. It's down in the Bermuda, but it's still above the ground, so I can kind of slide underneath it. Yeah, really easy to get underneath a golf ball with the SBC. It's a solid grind, man. I'm going to be honest. I really feel like if I wanted to get super low, I could really do that with this and hit one straight up in the air because this thing just has so much relief on it. So now we've got a shot where we kind of have to go over this bunker. It's going to be a little bit of a lower trajectory shot, I would say, hopefully with a little bit of spin. If I can do that, I guess we'll find out. We'll start with the MG4. Why not? Low checker, very solid. Nice if I flew it far enough, but yeah, when you start to look at this SM9, it is so freaking rounded. I mean, it's like crazy. And look, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, it is genuinely all relative. There's things I really like about the roundedness when I go to open it up, but like if I'm gonna play this square faced, it's not something I'm, over the moon about. That's really the difference I'm noticing between this S grind and the standard mount C. Like, this is just harder to get underneath a golf ball. Off this tight turf where I want to make sure that I'm kind of getting underneath a golf ball and I'm catching it on those bottom grooves to kind of hit a low checker, it almost seems like it just catches a little bit lower on the face. So, like, almost more skull territory. Like, that one, I wouldn't call it a skull, but it was more sort of in that territory, if you will, just because the leading edge sits higher. There's no other way around it. But I mean, look, at the end of the day, the hard thing is kind of going back and forth between these wedges because they just play differently. But I think if you're a good player, you can get used to either one. You just got to know what you really like. I've been a big fan of the standard bout C grind. I think it would be really cool for Vokey to offer a 6010S in the next SM model with just a lot more heel relief, kind of like that standard bout C grind. That almost plays like an M grind with a little bit more bounce. This just kind of plays like a fuller sole with a little bit of trail edge relief, if that makes sense. Right, guys, so there it is. That is a comparison comparison between the Taylormade MG4s and the Vokey SM9s. I think the main things that we've noticed today aren't really so much differences in performance. They're both great wedges in terms of launch and spin. The biggest things are going to be how the sole grinds play and really the overall look of the wedges themselves. Maybe a slight difference in feel because there's no coating on the Taylormade MG4s as opposed to the chrome plating on the SM9s, but really the look is the biggest thing I notice. I would say the Vokeys are a little bit more rounded with less offset. The MG4s are a little bit straighter with a little bit more offset. So now which one of those you prefer is really just going to come down to your personal preference. Me, honestly, I like them both in different ways, and quite frankly, at this point, I'm honestly not sure which one I'm going to play because there's pluses and minuses to both, as I have kind of mentioned a few times now. But really, I think if you're somebody who has never considered a Taylormade wedge, they're very good. I mean, I'm super impressed with the MG4s. I love the fact that they've introduced more grind options. I love the raw face. I think in really sunny conditions, it does do a much better job at kind of blocking the glare. I think it maybe feels a skosh softer, but it's not much. The overall size of the wedge is really good. The lines in the gap and sand wedge are great. They've also done a really good job with the backing of this wedge. It's not nearly as standoutish as Taylormade products tend to be. Honestly, Taylormade is in the wedge game. I think if you're somebody who really was like, I would never play a Taylormade wedge, you're crazy for that because the MG4s are really, really good. At the same time, Vokey also makes an awesome product, and you can take care of some of the issues I've mentioned, like the straightness of the top line and the leading edge in the gap and sand wedges through wedge works. So that is something that can be done, and you can also go raw through wedge works, so you don't maybe get as much glare from the sun, but that does come at a little bit of an upcharge. Overall, like I've said, great wedges, both of them, just a little bit different in terms of looks and how they perform in terms of the grinds themselves. But I'm very curious to hear your thoughts. Are you a bigger fan of the SM9s or the MG4s? And whichever one you are a bigger fan of, let me know why. I'm always curious to hear what you guys think about these products. And if you're playing one of these wedges, comment down below your set makeup, what you're using in terms of lofts, grinds, shafts. I'm always curious to kind of see what you guys are playing and maybe why you're using it as well. So let me know why you're using those grinds, those shafts, those lofts. It's something that I find very intriguing as the equipment junkie himself. Guys, that's a review. If you enjoyed it, be sure to give it a like, comment if you have any questions at all, or shoot me a DM via Instagram. Make sure you're subscribed to the YouTube channel. Go ahead and click that notification bell, and also make sure you're following us on our other social media channels, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and TikTok. We'll catch you in the next video. Peace.